She stumbled off the dusty stagecoach, blood soaking through her dress. No one noticed, except one man. A detective with sharp eyes, a haunted past, and a gut feeling that this woman was in more danger than anyone realized. But what he didn't know was just how deep the mystery went. Thank you so much for watching, and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story, and where you're watching from, and why you're following this. The autumn wind swept through the streets of Denver, Colorado, carrying with it the scent of burning coal and distant rain. Detective Marcus Holloway stood beneath the awning of the Grand Hotel, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the wooden boardwalk. His dark eyes, sharp and observant beneath the brim of his fedora, watched as the afternoon stagecoach rattled into town, its wheels throwing up clouds of dust that glowed golden in the fading sunlight. It was October of 1897, and Denver had grown from a mining camp into a thriving city of brick buildings and electric streetlights. Yet the stagecoach still ran its route from the smaller mountain towns, bringing travelers who preferred the familiar jostle of the coach to the newer railway lines that cut through the Rockies. Marcus had been waiting for this particular coach. A telegram had arrived at the police station that morning, cryptic and unsigned, stating only that someone aboard today's arrival would need immediate assistance. As a detective with the Denver Police Department, he had learned long ago not to ignore such warnings, even anonymous ones. The stagecoach door swung open, and the driver climbed down to help the passengers disembark. First came an elderly gentleman with a silver walking stick, then a portly businessman clutching a leather satchel. Marcus's attention sharpened as a woman appeared in the doorway. She was striking, even from a distance. Her traveling dress was a deep burgundy, trimmed with black velvet, and her auburn hair was pinned beneath a small hat adorned with a single feather. But it was not her beauty that caught Marcus's eye. It was the way she swayed slightly as she reached for the driver's hand, and the dark stain spreading across the side of her dress, just below her ribs. Blood. Marcus moved immediately, his long strides eating up the distance between them. The woman stepped down onto the dusty street, her gloved hand pressed against her side. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a tight line of determination. She took one step, then another, before her knees began to buckle. Marcus caught her before she fell, his strong arms supporting her weight. Up close, he could see the pain etched in her delicate features, the way her green eyes fought to remain focused. She looked up at him, surprise flickering across her face. "I have you," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady and calm. "You're safe now." The woman tried to speak, but only a soft gasp escaped her lips. The other passengers had noticed now, and a small crowd began to gather. Marcus glanced at the driver, a weathered man named Dutch whom he knew from previous investigations. "Dutch, fetch Dr. Pemberton immediately. Tell him to meet me at the hotel." "Right away, Detective," Dutch said, already running toward the physician's office 2 blocks down. Marcus carefully lifted the woman in his arms. She was lighter than he expected, and he could feel her trembling despite her obvious effort to remain composed. Her hand clutched at his coat, and she managed to whisper, "My bag, please." "Which one?" Marcus asked, looking back at the luggage being unloaded. "The small one, black leather. It's important." Marcus nodded to a young porter who had rushed over to help. "Bring all of this lady's belongings to room 12 at the Grand Hotel, especially the black leather bag." The porter nodded eagerly, and Marcus carried the woman through the hotel's ornate entrance. The lobby was decorated in the height of Victorian elegance, with crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs, and walls papered in rich damask. The desk clerk, a thin man named Harrison, looked up in alarm. "Detective Holloway, what happened?" "This woman needs immediate assistance. Prepare room 12 and bring hot water, clean linens, and brandy." "Yes, sir, right away." Marcus climbed the carpeted stairs, mindful of every step, trying not to jostle his injured charge. The woman had closed her eyes now, her breathing shallow and rapid. A trail of blood drops marked their path. Room 12 was one of the hotel's finest, with a large 4-poster bed, a fireplace, and tall windows overlooking the street. Marcus laid the woman gently on the bed, careful to support her head. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked at him with an expression that mixed gratitude and fear. "What is your name?" Marcus asked softly, pulling a chair close to the bedside. "Catherine," she whispered. "Catherine Monroe." "Miss Monroe, I'm Detective Marcus Holloway. Can you tell me what happened? Who did this to you?" Catherine's eyes darkened, and she turned her face away. I don't know. It happened so quickly. Marcus studied her carefully. He had been a detective for 8 years, and he had learned to read people, to sense when they were hiding something. Catherine Monroe was frightened, certainly, but there was something else in her expression. Secrecy, determination. Before he could press further, Harrison arrived with a maid carrying the requested items. They were followed moments later by Dr. Pemberton, a distinguished gentleman in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Marcus, what do we have here?" the doctor asked, setting down his medical bag. "Stab wound, I believe, left side below the ribs. She arrived on the afternoon coach." Dr. Pemberton nodded gravely and turned to Catherine with a reassuring smile. "Miss, I'm Dr. Pemberton. I'm going to examine your injury. Detective Holloway, if you would wait outside." Marcus hesitated, looking at Catherine. She met his gaze, and for a moment, something passed between them, an unspoken connection that surprised him. Then she nodded slightly, and he rose from the chair. "I'll be just outside the door," he said. "You're safe here, Miss Monroe." In the hallway, Marcus paced, his mind racing. A woman arrives in Denver, wounded and secretive. An anonymous telegram warns of her arrival. Something significant was happening, and his instincts told him that Catherine Monroe was at the center of it. The porter arrived with Catherine's belongings, a small trunk and 2 bags, including the black leather one she had been so concerned about. Marcus tipped the boy generously and asked him to leave everything just inside the door of room 12. 20 minutes later, Dr. Pemberton emerged, wiping his hands on a clean cloth. His expression was serious but not grave. "The wound is not as severe as it first appeared," he said. "The blade struck at an angle, mostly catching her corset stays and layers of clothing. She has a deep cut, about 4 inches long, but it did not penetrate the abdominal cavity. She was extraordinarily fortunate. I've cleaned and stitched the wound. She'll need rest and careful attention to prevent infection." Relief washed through Marcus, surprising him with its intensity. "May I speak with her?" "Briefly. She's weak from blood loss and shock. Don't tire her." Marcus entered the room to find Catherine propped up against pillows, her dress replaced by a white nightgown provided by the hotel. Her auburn hair had been loosened and fell in waves around her shoulders. Even pale and injured, she was beautiful in a way that made Marcus's heart skip unexpectedly. He pulled the chair close again and sat down. "Dr. Pemberton says you'll recover." "Yes." Catherine's voice was stronger now. "Thank you, Detective Holloway, for everything. Please call me Marcus." A small smile touched her lips. "Then you must call me Catherine." "Catherine," Marcus said, enjoying the sound of her name. "I need to ask you some questions. Whoever did this to you could still be a danger." Her smile faded and fear flickered in her green eyes. "I told you I don't know who it was, but you know why." It was not a question, and Catherine understood that. She looked down at her hands, which were twisting the edge of the blanket. "It's complicated. Most crimes are." Marcus kept his voice gentle. "I can help you, but only if you trust me." Catherine looked up at him, studying his face as if trying to read his character in his features. Marcus met her gaze steadily, letting her see his sincerity. Finally she spoke. "I came to Denver because I received a letter. It was from my uncle, Richard Monroe. He's a banker here, quite prominent. We haven't spoken in years, not since I was a child, but the letter said he needed to see me urgently. It said that my father, his brother, had left me something in his care, and that it was time for me to claim it." "Your father is deceased?" "Yes. He died 6 years ago in Chicago. My mother passed when I was very young. I've been living in San Francisco, working as a teacher." Marcus noted how her voice softened when she mentioned her father. "What did your uncle's letter say about this inheritance?" "Very little. Just that it was valuable, and that I needed to come to Denver in person to receive it. He included money for the journey and asked me to tell no one." "Did you?" "No. I kept it secret, as he asked." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "When did the attack happen?" Catherine closed her eyes, remembering. "This morning. I was staying overnight in a small town called Silverton, about 50 miles from here. I had a room at the inn. Someone broke in before dawn. I woke to find a figure standing over my bed. I tried to scream, but he put his hand over my mouth. Then I felt the knife. I managed to fight him off, grabbed my bags, and ran. The stagecoach was about to leave, and I climbed aboard. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I just wanted to get here. To Denver. To my uncle. Can you describe your attacker?" "It was dark. I saw only a silhouette. A man, I think, of average height. He wore dark clothes and something over his face. Did he say anything? Catherine hesitated, and Marcus saw the fear return to her eyes. Yes. He whispered something before I escaped. He said, "Give it back, or next time you'll die." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Give what back? I don't know. I don't have anything except my personal belongings and the money my uncle sent for travel. May I examine your bags? Catherine nodded toward the black leather bag on the side table. That one is the most important. It has my personal documents, my father's pocket watch, and some jewelry my mother left me. Marcus rose and retrieved the bag, bringing it to the bedside. Catherine opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were indeed personal items. A silver pocket watch, a small velvet box containing a simple gold locket and matching earrings, a bundle of letters tied with ribbon, and a leather journal. This journal, Marcus said, picking it up carefully. May I? It was my father's. He kept notes about his work. He was an accountant. Marcus opened the journal to find pages filled with neat handwriting, columns of figures, and what appeared to be business notations. Nothing immediately suspicious, but he would need to examine it more carefully. A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus opened it to find Harrison, the desk clerk. "Excuse me, detective, but there's a gentleman downstairs asking about Miss Monroe. He says he's her uncle, Richard Monroe." Catherine gasped softly. Marcus turned to her. "Were you expected today?" "No. I sent no word of my arrival. The letter said to come at my earliest convenience, but I sent no reply." Marcus's mind worked quickly. How did Richard Monroe know his niece had arrived in Denver? He looked at Catherine and saw his own suspicion reflected in her eyes. "Tell Mr. Monroe that Miss Monroe has taken ill from the journey and is resting. She will call upon him tomorrow when she has recovered." Harrison nodded and departed. Marcus closed the door and turned back to Catherine. "Something is wrong here," she said quietly. "How did he know I had arrived?" "That's what I intend to find out." Marcus moved to the window and looked down at the street. A well-dressed man in his 50s was just exiting the hotel, climbing into a private carriage. "Is that your uncle?" Catherine joined him at the window, moving slowly, one hand pressed to her wounded side. She looked down at the departing carriage. "I haven't seen him since I was 10 years old, but yes, I believe that's him. He looks like my father did." Marcus watched the carriage disappear around the corner. "Catherine, I think you're in serious danger. Whatever your father left you, someone wants it badly enough to kill for it. Until we know more, I'm going to post a guard outside your door." "You believe me then?" Marcus turned to face her, standing close in the dimming light of the room. "I believe that someone attacked you. I believe you're frightened and that you're hiding something, though I suspect you don't fully understand what it is you're hiding. And I believe that I'm going to find out the truth and keep you safe while I do it." Catherine looked up at him, and Marcus found himself captivated by her eyes, by the courage he saw there despite her fear. She was not just beautiful, she was strong, intelligent, and determined. He felt drawn to her in a way that went beyond his duty as a detective. "Why?" Catherine asked softly. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." Marcus smiled slightly. "Perhaps that's why. I'd like to know you, Catherine Monroe, and I have a feeling that before this is over, we're going to know each other quite well." A faint blush colored Catherine's pale cheeks, and she looked away, but not before Marcus saw the hint of a smile on her lips. "Rest now," he said gently. "I'll arrange for a guard and for dinner to be brought to your room. Tomorrow, we'll visit your uncle together and get some answers." "Together?" "Together," Marcus confirmed. "Whatever this mystery is, we'll solve it together." As Marcus left the room and arranged for Officer Mitchell, a trusted colleague, to stand guard, he found his thoughts returning again and again to Catherine. There was something about her, something that had captured not just his professional interest, but something deeper, something personal. He had been alone for so long, devoted to his work, never allowing himself the luxury of emotional connection. But Catherine Monroe, bleeding and frightened, had stepped off that stagecoach and into his life, and Marcus suspected that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The morning sun broke through the lace curtains of room 12, casting delicate patterns across the floor. Catherine stirred, wincing at the sharp pain in her side as she shifted against the pillows. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then the events of the previous day came flooding back. The attack in Silverton, the desperate flight to Denver, and the dark-eyed detective who had caught her when she fell. Marcus Holloway. Even thinking his name brought a strange warmth to her chest. one that had nothing to do with her injury. A soft knock at the door made her tense. "Miss Monroe? It's Officer Mitchell. Detective Holloway is here to see you." Catherine pulled the blanket higher, suddenly aware of her appearance. "One moment, please." She rose carefully from the bed, grateful that the pain was less severe than yesterday. The hotel maid had left a clean dress hanging in the wardrobe, a simple navy blue day dress with white collar and cuffs. It took some effort to dress herself, working around the bandages Dr. Pemberton had wrapped around her torso, but Catherine managed. She braided her auburn hair and pinned it into a modest coil at the nape of her neck, then checked her reflection in the mirror above the washstand. Pale but presentable, she took a deep breath and opened the door. Marcus stood in the hallway, and Catherine's breath caught slightly at the sight of him. In the daylight, she could better appreciate his features: the strong jaw, the intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything, the way his tall frame filled the doorway. He wore a dark suit with a silver watch chain across his vest, and he held his fedora in his hands. "Good morning," he said, and his smile was genuine and warm. "How are you feeling?" "Better, thank you." "Sore, but better." Marcus's eyes traveled over her face, as if assessing her condition for himself. "You have more color today. That's good. Are you well enough for a visit to your uncle's bank?" "Yes. I'm eager to understand what's happening." "As am I." Marcus offered his arm. "Shall we?" Catherine hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in the crook of his elbow. Even through the layers of fabric, she could feel the strength in his arm, and it made her feel safer than she had in days. They descended the stairs together, and Catherine noticed how other guests in the lobby watched them with curious eyes. She supposed they made an unusual pair, a detective and an injured woman he was escorting through the city. Outside, a hansom cab waited at the curb. Marcus helped Catherine inside with careful attention to her injury, then settled beside her. The driver clicked to the horse, and they rolled down the busy street. Denver had transformed into a bustling metropolis since Catherine's childhood visits. Buildings of brick and stone rose several stories high, and the streets were filled with carriages, wagons, and the occasional automobile chugging along with great plumes of smoke. Electric wires crisscrossed overhead, and the sidewalks were crowded with well-dressed businessmen and ladies in the latest fashions. "It's changed so much," Catherine murmured, watching the city pass by the window. "Progress waits for no one," Marcus said, "though sometimes I miss the quieter days." He paused, then added, "Tell me about your father, Catherine. What kind of man was he?" Catherine turned from the window, surprised by the personal question. But there was genuine interest in Marcus's eyes, not just professional curiosity. "He was kind," she said softly, "gentle and scholarly. He loved numbers, loved the precision of accounting. He said that numbers never lied, that they told the truth even when people didn't." She smiled at the memory. "He used to let me sit in his study while he worked. He'd explain his ledgers to me, teaching me mathematics far beyond what young ladies were supposed to learn. He sounds like a progressive man." He was. My mother's death devastated him, but he never let it diminish his care for me. We were very close. Catherine's voice grew quieter. When he died, it felt like losing the only anchor I had in the world. Marcus's hand covered hers where it rested on the seat between them. The gesture was brief, but comforting. I understand that kind of loss. My own parents died when I was 19. Yellow fever. I became a police officer partly because I wanted to protect others from experiencing that sudden, senseless loss. Catherine looked at their hands, at the way Marcus's fingers had briefly touched hers, and felt that strange warmth again. "I'm sorry for your loss. And I for yours." Marcus withdrew his hand, but his eyes held hers for a moment longer. But loss also teaches us the value of what we have. It makes us appreciate the people who come into our lives. The intensity of his gaze made Catherine's heart beat faster. Was he speaking generally, or was there a deeper meaning in his words? Before she could respond, the cab slowed to a stop. "Monroe Trust and Savings Bank," the driver announced. The bank was an impressive structure of gray stone with tall columns flanking its entrance. Brass letters above the door proclaimed its name in elegant script. Marcus helped Catherine down from the cab, and they climbed the wide steps together. Inside, the bank was cool and quiet, with marble floors and mahogany counters polished to a high shine. Several clerks worked behind brass cages, counting money and recording transactions in large ledgers. A few customers waited on velvet-cushioned benches. A distinguished man in a dark suit approached them immediately. "May I help you?" "We're here to see Mr. Richard Monroe," Marcus said, producing his detective's badge. "Tell him his niece, Miss Catherine Monroe, has arrived." The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "Of course, Detective. Please wait here." He disappeared through a door marked private, and Catherine found herself gripping Marcus's arm a bit tighter. Marcus covered her hand with his own, steadying her. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "I'm right here with you." Catherine nodded, drawing strength from his presence. A few moments later, the door opened again, and a man emerged who could only be her uncle. Richard Monroe was in his mid-50s, with gray-streaked brown hair and the same green eyes that Catherine saw in her own reflection. He was well-dressed in an expensive suit, and he carried himself with the confidence of a successful banker. But there was something in his expression, a tightness around his mouth, a wariness in his eyes that put Catherine immediately on guard. "Catherine," he approached with outstretched hands, but his smile seemed forced. "My dear niece, I was so worried when I heard you had taken ill yesterday. I came to the hotel at once." "How did you know I had arrived, Uncle?" Catherine asked, her voice steady despite her nervousness. Richard's smile faltered slightly. "Why, the stagecoach driver mentioned a young woman fitting your description. Denver is not so large that news doesn't travel." His eyes shifted to Marcus. "And who is this gentleman?" "Detective Marcus Holloway, Denver Police Department," Marcus said, his tone professional and cool. "I'm investigating an attack on Miss Monroe that occurred yesterday morning in Silverton." The color drained from Richard's face. "An attack? Catherine, are you hurt?" "I was stabbed," Catherine said bluntly, watching her uncle's reaction. "Someone broke into my room and tried to kill me. He said I should give something back, or I would die." Richard's hand went to his collar, loosening it slightly. "Good God, this is terrible. Who would do such a thing?" "That's what we're here to find out," Marcus said. "Mr. Monroe, you sent your niece a letter asking her to come to Denver to claim an inheritance from her father. What exactly is this inheritance?" Richard glanced around the bank nervously. "Perhaps we should discuss this in my office. This is not a conversation for public ears." He led them through the private door and down a hallway lined with paintings of stern-faced men, who Catherine assumed were previous bank presidents. Richard's office was at the end, a spacious room with a large desk, leather chairs, and windows overlooking the street. Once they were inside with the door closed, Richard moved to a cabinet and poured himself a generous measure of whiskey. Despite the early hour, he did not offer any to his guests. "Mr. Monroe," Marcus said firmly, "the inheritance, please." Richard drank deeply before answering. "6 years ago, when my brother Thomas died, he left certain documents in my care. He made me promise to give them to Catherine when she reached the age of 25, or if anything should happen to make it necessary sooner." "I turned 25 3 months ago," Catherine said. "Is that why you sent for me?" "Partially." Richard set down his glass with a trembling hand. "But also because I've been receiving threats. Someone knows about the documents and they want them. I thought if I gave them to you, the threats would stop. I never imagined they would come after you directly." Marcus stepped forward, his expression hard. "What are these documents, Mr. Monroe? What could possibly be worth attempted murder?" Richard sank into his desk chair, suddenly looking much older. "Evidence. Evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and corruption at the highest levels of Denver's financial institutions." The room fell silent. Catherine felt her legs weaken, and Marcus immediately guided her to a chair, his hand supportive on her elbow. "Explain," Marcus demanded. Richard rubbed his face wearily. "My brother Thomas was the accountant for several prominent Denver businesses and banks, including this one. About 7 years ago, he began to notice irregularities. Money disappearing from accounts, false entries in ledgers, deposits that didn't match withdrawals. He started investigating quietly, keeping his own records. The journal," Catherine whispered, understanding dawning. "The journal in my bag." "Yes," Richard confirmed. "Thomas coded everything carefully. To anyone else, it looks like ordinary accounting notes. But he taught you mathematics, Catherine. He taught you his methods. You're the only one who could decode what he discovered." Marcus's mind was racing. "Who is behind this fraud?" Richard's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Harrison Caldwell. He's the president of Denver's largest bank, the First National. He's also on the city council, and he has connections to the governor. Thomas discovered that Caldwell has been embezzling funds from his own bank for years, using them to buy political influence and business advantages. The amounts are staggering, hundreds of thousands of dollars. "Why didn't your brother go to the police when he discovered this?" Marcus asked. "Because Caldwell owns half the police force," Richard said bitterly. Thomas didn't know who to trust. He was planning to take his evidence to the federal authorities when he became ill. The doctor said it was heart failure, but Thomas told me, in his final days, that he suspected he'd been poisoned. He made me swear to protect Catherine, to keep her away from Denver until she was old enough and strong enough to decide what to do with the truth. Catherine felt tears sting her eyes. Her father, murdered for uncovering the truth. "And you've kept this secret for 6 years?" "I had no choice." Richard's voice cracked. "Caldwell is too powerful. I thought if I just kept quiet, kept the journal hidden, that you could live your life in peace." But then Caldwell somehow found out that Thomas had kept records. "He's been pressuring me, threatening me. I panicked and sent for you, thinking I could give you the journal, and you could take it far away, somewhere safe. Instead, you painted a target on her back," Marcus said coldly. "I know." Richard buried his face in his hands. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm a coward, Catherine. I'm not the brave man your father was." Catherine stood, moving to her uncle despite the pain in her side. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Uncle Richard, my father would want us to do what's right. We have to stop Caldwell. He'll kill us all," Richard said hopelessly. "Not if I have anything to say about it," Marcus interjected. His voice was steel. "Mr. Monroe, I need that journal, and I need you to tell me everything you know about Caldwell's operations." For the next hour, Richard talked. He explained how Caldwell had slowly corrupted Denver's financial institutions, how he had bought politicians and police officers, how he had built an empire on stolen money and broken trust. Catherine listened with growing horror and determination. Her father had died trying to expose this evil. She would not let his sacrifice be in vain. Finally, Marcus stood. "Mr. Monroe, I'm going to need you to stay somewhere safe for the next few days. Do you have family outside Denver?" "My wife's sister lives in Colorado Springs." "Go there today. Take the afternoon train and don't tell anyone where you're going." Marcus turned to Catherine. "And you're coming with me." "Where?" Catherine asked. "To the only man in Denver I know I can trust. Federal Marshal James Cooper. He's been investigating corruption in the territory for months. This is exactly the kind of evidence he needs." They left the bank shortly after, with the journal secured in Catherine's bag. Richard departed for the train station, looking relieved to be escaping the city. Marcus hailed another cab, and they rode in tense silence toward the federal building on the edge of downtown. Catherine found herself watching Marcus as he stared out the window, his jaw set, his eyes distant. He was planning, she realized, thinking through every angle, every danger. He had taken her problem onto his own shoulders without hesitation, risking his career and perhaps his life to help her. "Marcus," she said softly. He turned to her, and his expression softened. "Yes? Thank you, for believing me, for helping me. You didn't have to do any of this." Marcus reached across the seat and took her hand, holding it gently in his larger one. "Catherine, from the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach, wounded and brave and beautiful, I knew you were going to change my life. I don't know how yet, and I don't know what comes after we finish this business with Caldwell, but I know that I want to be the man standing beside you through all of it." Catherine's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her with such honest emotion, such raw sincerity. "I barely know you." "Then let's change that." Marcus smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warm and wonderful. "Let's solve this mystery together, bring down this corrupt banker, and then let's take the time to know each other properly. Dinners and walks in the park and long conversations about everything and nothing. Would you like that?" Catherine felt tears spill down her cheeks. But they were good tears, hopeful tears. "Yes, yes, I would like that very much." Marcus lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, his eyes never leaving hers. In that moment, with danger all around them and uncertainty ahead, Catherine felt something she hadn't felt since her father died. Hope. Not just hope for justice, but hope for something more, something personal and precious. The cab rolled to a stop in front of the federal building, and Marcus reluctantly released her hand. "Ready?" Catherine touched the bag containing her father's journal, then looked at the strong, honorable man beside her. "Ready." Together, they climbed the steps to face whatever came next, their hands almost touching, their hearts beginning to beat in rhythm. The federal building stood as a monument to justice in Denver, its granite facade weathered by mountain winds, but standing firm and unyielding. Marcus held the heavy door open for Catherine, his hand briefly touching the small of her back as she passed through, a gesture both protective and intimate that sent a flutter through her chest, despite the gravity of their situation. Inside, the building was austere, with plain wooden floors and walls lined with notices and wanted posters. A clerk sat behind a desk, sorting through papers with methodical precision. He looked up as they approached, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of Marcus's badge. "Detective Holloway," the clerk said, straightening in his chair. "What brings Denver police to federal territory?" "I need to see Marshal Cooper immediately. It's urgent and concerns territorial corruption." The clerk's expression grew serious. "The marshal is in a meeting with officials from Washington, but I'll inform him you're here. Please wait." Marcus guided Catherine to a wooden bench against the wall. She sat carefully, mindful of her injury, and Marcus settled beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Catherine found comfort in his proximity, in the solid strength he represented. "Are you in pain?" Marcus asked quietly, his dark eyes searching her face. "A little," Catherine admitted, "but I'll manage. This is too important." Marcus's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally, as if they had been doing this for years rather than mere hours. "You're remarkably brave, Catherine Monroe. Most people would have fled Denver the moment they learned about Caldwell's power." "My father didn't raise a coward," Catherine said firmly. "He spent his life seeking truth in numbers, in facts. He died protecting that truth. How could I do anything less than honor his sacrifice? Your father would be very proud of you." And Catherine squeezed his hand. "And what about you, Marcus? You're risking everything by helping me. If Caldwell truly owns half the police force, bringing this evidence forward could destroy your career." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I became a detective to serve justice, not corrupt men in expensive suits. If standing up to Caldwell cost me my badge, so be it. Some things are more important than a job." He paused, then added more softly, "Some people are more important." Before Catherine could respond to the clear meaning in his words, a door opened and a tall man in his 40s emerged. He wore a dark suit with a silver marshal's star pinned to his vest, and his weathered face bore the marks of a man who had seen hard justice on the frontier. His gray eyes were sharp and assessing as they took in Marcus and Catherine. "Holloway," he said, his voice a deep rumble. "This must be serious to pull me from a meeting with the territorial governor's representatives." Marcus stood, bringing Catherine up with him. "Marshal Cooper, this is Miss Catherine Monroe. She has evidence of massive fraud and embezzlement involving Harrison Caldwell and the First National Bank." Cooper's expression remained neutral, but Catherine saw a flash of interest in his eyes. "That's a serious accusation. Come into my office." They followed him down a hallway to a spacious office dominated by a large desk covered with maps and documents. Cooper closed the door firmly behind them and gestured to 2 chairs facing the desk. "Now then," Cooper said, settling into his own chair, "tell me everything." For the next hour, Marcus and Catherine laid out the entire story. Thomas Monroe's discovery of the embezzlement, his coded journal, his suspicious death, Richard Monroe's fear and cowardice, and the attack on Catherine in Silverton. Catherine produced the journal, opening it to show page after page of her father's careful notations. Cooper listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as the tale unfolded. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers beneath his chin. "I've been investigating Caldwell for 3 months," he said finally. "We knew something was wrong at First National. Deposits from mining companies that never quite matched the amounts recorded, loans that disappeared from the books, city funds that vanished into thin air. But Caldwell is careful, and he has powerful friends. Every time we got close, doors slammed shut. Witnesses refused to talk. Records mysteriously disappeared. My father's journal is the key," Catherine said. "He taught me his coding system when I was young. If you give me time, I can decode every transaction he documented." Cooper studied her with newfound respect. "How long would you need?" "A day, perhaps 2. The code isn't complicated once you understand the pattern, but there are hundreds of entries." "Can you work here, in this building?" "It would be safer than a hotel." Marcus shook his head. "No. If Caldwell has been watching Richard Monroe, he knows Catherine is in Denver. He may have people watching federal buildings, looking for exactly this kind of activity. We need somewhere unexpected, somewhere he wouldn't think to look." "My house," Cooper said immediately. "I live alone on the outskirts of town near the foothills. It's isolated, easily defended, and Caldwell's people would have no reason to watch it. I'll arrange for additional marshals to guard the property." "That could work," Marcus agreed. "When can we move her?" "Immediately. I'll have my deputy bring a closed carriage to the rear entrance in 20 minutes. Detective, I assume you'll be accompanying Miss Monroe?" "Every step of the way," Marcus confirmed, his voice leaving no room for argument. Cooper smiled slightly. "I thought as much. Very well. Let's get Miss Monroe somewhere safe so she can finish her father's work." 20 minutes later, Catherine found herself in a nondescript black carriage with curtained windows, seated between Marcus and Marshal Cooper. 2 additional marshals rode alongside on horseback, their rifles ready. They traveled through Denver's streets, then out into the rolling hills that surrounded the city. Cooper's house proved to be a modest 2-story structure of whitewashed wood, surrounded by tall pines and aspens whose leaves were turning gold with autumn. A wraparound porch offered views of the mountains to the west, and a small barn stood behind the house, where Cooper kept 2 horses. "It's not fancy," Cooper said as he helped Catherine down from the carriage, "but it's defensible and private. The nearest neighbor is 2 miles away." Inside, the house was clean and simply furnished, with the practical touches of a bachelor accustomed to caring for himself. Cooper showed Catherine to a bedroom on the 2nd floor, small but comfortable, with a desk by the window that looked out over the pines. "Will this suffice for your work?" he asked. "It's perfect," Catherine assured him. "Thank you, Marshal." After Cooper left to brief the guards he'd stationed around the property, Marcus lingered in the doorway. Catherine had moved to the window, looking out at the peaceful landscape, so different from the danger and intrigue of the city. "A penny for your thoughts," Marcus said softly. Catherine turned, and in the afternoon light streaming through the window, Marcus thought she had never looked more beautiful. Her auburn hair caught the sun, turning it to burnished copper, and her green eyes held a mixture of determination and something else, something warmer and more personal. "I was thinking about my father," she said, wondering if he ever imagined that his work would lead to all of this, that his daughter would be hiding in a marshal's house, decoding his journal to bring down a corrupt banker. Marcus crossed the room to stand beside her at the window. He knew the risks. "That's why he protected you, why he asked your uncle to wait until you were old enough to make your own choices." "Do you think he would approve?" Catherine asked. "Of what I'm doing? Of the danger I've brought to others?" Her eyes met Marcus's. "Of you?" Marcus smiled, reaching up to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I think he would be grateful that his daughter found someone who sees her strength, her courage, her brilliant mind. Someone who wants to stand beside her, not protect her from the world, but face the world with her." Catherine's breath caught at the tenderness in his touch, in his words. "Marcus, we barely know each other. I know that you're brave and smart and kind. I know that you fight for what's right even when it terrifies you. I know that every moment I spend with you, I discover something new to admire." Marcus's hand moved from her cheek to cradle the side of her face. "I know that I've been alone for so long, wedded to my work, convinced that was enough, and then you stepped off that stagecoach, wounded but unbroken, and in that instant, everything changed." "For me too," Catherine whispered. "When you caught me, when I looked up and saw your eyes, I felt something I've never felt before. Safe, yes, but also seen, truly seen, not just as a woman who needs rescuing, but as a person who deserves partnership." "Then let me be your partner," Marcus said, "in this fight against Caldwell, and after in whatever comes next. Let me stand with you, Catherine." "Yes," Catherine breathed, and then Marcus was kissing her, gentle and careful of her injury, but with an emotion that made her heart soar. His lips were warm and firm, and Catherine's hands came up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. When they finally drew apart, both breathing quickly, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "I'm sorry. That was perhaps too forward." "Don't apologize," Catherine said, smiling. "I've been hoping you would do that since you held my hand in the carriage." Marcus laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Then I should have done it sooner." A discreet cough from the doorway made them step apart. Cooper stood there, trying and failing to hide a smile. "I hate to interrupt, but we should discuss security arrangements and get Miss Monroe started on that journal. We don't know how much time we have before Caldwell makes another move." "Of course," Marcus said, clearing his throat. "Catherine, are you ready to begin?" Catherine nodded, moving to the desk where her father's journal lay waiting. As she sat down and opened it, Marcus pulled up a chair beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, his steady presence. "Show me," he said. "Teach me how your father's mind worked." For the next several hours, Catherine explained the coding system her father had developed. It was elegant in its simplicity. Dates were shifted by adding specific numbers based on the month. Amounts were written in reverse order, and names were abbreviated using the last letter instead of the first. Once Marcus understood the pattern, he began helping her decode the entries, their heads bent close together over the pages. Cooper brought them dinner as the sun set, a simple meal of beef stew and fresh bread, and they ate at the desk, unwilling to lose momentum. As darkness fell and oil lamps were lit, the scope of Thomas Monroe's discovery became clear. "Good God," Marcus muttered, staring at the figures they'd decoded. "Caldwell embezzled over $300,000 in just the 2 years your father documented. At this rate, over 6 years, he could have stolen millions." "And look at this," Catherine said, pointing to a series of entries near the end of the journal. "These aren't just embezzlements. These are bribes. My father documented payments to police officers, city councilmen, even judges. Names, dates, amounts." Cooper, who had been reading over their shoulders, whistled low. "This is exactly what we need. With this evidence, we can bring charges not just against Caldwell, but against everyone in his corrupt network. We can clean out the rot that's been poisoning Denver's institutions." "When do we move against him?" Marcus asked. "Tomorrow," Cooper said firmly. "I'll send a telegram tonight to the territorial governor and to the federal prosecutor. We'll need to move quickly before Caldwell realizes what's happening. Detective, I'll need you to identify which police officers on this list are still serving, and which ones have enough clean record to help us make the arrests." Marcus nodded grimly. "There are good men on the force, men who will be sickened to learn how deep this corruption goes. I'll make a list." As Cooper left to send his telegrams, Catherine slumped back in her chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. The pain in her side had intensified with the long hours of concentration, and she pressed her hand against the bandages. Marcus noticed immediately. "You need rest. You've been working for hours with a serious injury." "I'm fine," Catherine protested, but even as she spoke, a wave of dizziness washed over her. Marcus stood and gently lifted her from the chair, careful not to jar her wounded side. "You're stubborn and brave, and I admire that. But even the strongest soldiers need to rest between battles." He carried her to the bed and laid her down carefully, removing her shoes and covering her with a quilt. Catherine looked up at him, her eyes heavy with fatigue. "Will you stay?" she asked softly. "Just until I fall asleep. I don't want to be alone." Marcus pulled the desk chair to the bedside and sat down, taking her hand in his. "I'll stay as long as you need me." "Marcus," Catherine murmured, her eyes beginning to close. "When this is over, when Caldwell is in prison and the danger has passed, what happens to us?" Marcus brought her hand to his lips, kissing her palm gently. "Then we begin our real story, Catherine. The one where we take those walks in the park, have those long dinners, learn everything about each other. The one where I court you properly, with flowers and poetry, and all the romance you deserve." "I'd like that," Catherine whispered, a smile touching her lips. "I'd like that very much." As her breathing deepened into sleep, Marcus sat watch beside her, his hand still holding hers. Through the window, he could see the silhouettes of the marshals standing guard, and beyond them, the lights of Denver twinkling in the valley below. Tomorrow they would face Caldwell and his corruption. Tomorrow they would finish the work Thomas Monroe had started. But tonight, in this quiet room with Catherine sleeping peacefully beside him, Marcus allowed himself to imagine a future beyond the danger, a future where he and Catherine could build something beautiful together. He had been alone for so long, had convinced himself that solitude was enough, but Catherine had shown him a different path, one where strength wasn't found in isolation, but in partnership, where courage meant opening your heart as well as standing your ground. Whatever tomorrow brought, Marcus knew one truth with absolute certainty. He would protect Catherine with his life, fight beside her with all his strength, and when the battle was won, he would spend every day proving himself worthy of her love. Outside, an owl hooted in the pines, and the night wind whispered through the trees. Marcus settled more comfortably in his chair, his eyes never leaving Catherine's peaceful face, and kept his vigil until dawn began to paint the eastern sky with gold. Dawn broke over the Colorado mountains with breathtaking beauty, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Catherine woke to find Marcus asleep in the chair beside her bed, his head tilted back, his hand still holding hers even in slumber. Her heart swelled at the sight of him, this strong, principled man who had stayed by her side through the night. She squeezed his hand gently, and his eyes opened immediately, alert despite having just woken. When he saw her watching him, a slow smile spread across his face. "Good morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "How do you feel?" "Better." The rest helped. Catherine sat up carefully, testing her injury. The pain was still present but manageable. "Have you been here all night?" "I promised to stay as long as you needed me." Marcus stood and stretched, working out the stiffness from sleeping in the chair. "Besides, I wanted to be here when you woke. Today is the day we finish this." A knock at the door interrupted them, and Cooper entered carrying a tray with coffee and biscuits. His expression was grim but determined. "The federal prosecutor arrived an hour ago on the early train from Cheyenne," he said, setting down the tray. "I've briefed him on everything. He's reviewed the decoded journal entries and agrees we have enough evidence to arrest Caldwell and everyone on the bribery list. We move at noon." "Why noon?" Marcus asked, accepting a cup of coffee gratefully. "Caldwell always takes lunch at the Denver Club between noon and 2 o'clock. It's his routine, predictable as clockwork. We'll arrest him there publicly, where he can't run, and where his corrupt associates will see that no one is above the law." Cooper's eyes were hard. "I want every businessman and politician in Denver to understand that this territory will not tolerate corruption." Catherine rose from the bed, her mind already working through the implications. "He'll fight back. A man with that much power won't go quietly." "Which is why we're arresting everyone simultaneously," Cooper explained. "At noon, federal marshals and trusted police officers will arrest every person named in your father's journal. The corrupt police officers, the bribed councilmen, the judges who sold their integrity. We're cutting off all of Caldwell's support at once." Marcus set down his coffee cup, his expression troubled. "Marshal, with respect, that's a dangerous strategy. If even one of those arrests goes wrong, if word reaches Caldwell before we have him in custody, he could disappear. A man with his resources could be on a train to Mexico within hours." "That's why you're coming with me to make the arrest, Detective," Cooper said. "You know the Denver Club, you know the staff, and you know how to handle difficult suspects. Between us, we'll make sure Caldwell doesn't slip away." "And what about Catherine?" Marcus asked immediately. "She's still in danger until Caldwell is behind bars." "I'll stay here with the guards," Catherine said firmly. "I trust Marshal Cooper's men to protect me. You need to be there, Marcus. You need to see this through." Marcus crossed to her, taking both her hands in his. "Catherine, I don't want to leave you. I know." Catherine squeezed his hands. "But this is what my father would have wanted. Justice, served by good men who aren't afraid to stand up to corruption. You're one of those men, Marcus. Go and finish what my father started." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then pulled her gently into his arms, careful of her injury. Catherine rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "When I come back," Marcus said quietly, his lips near her ear, "when Caldwell is in prison and you're safe, we're going to have that dinner I promised you. Somewhere with candlelight and music, where I can tell you properly how extraordinary you are." Catherine pulled back just enough to look up at him, her green eyes shining. "I'll hold you to that promise, Detective Holloway." Marcus smiled and kissed her forehead tenderly. "I've never broken a promise to a lady yet, and I don't intend to start now." 2 hours later, Marcus and Cooper rode in an unmarked carriage toward the heart of Denver. Both men wore their badges concealed beneath their coats, and both carried revolvers, though they hoped the arrest would proceed without violence. Behind them, in 3 other carriages, rode additional marshals and the federal prosecutor, a stern man named Whitmore, who had built his career on bringing down corrupt officials. The Denver Club was an exclusive establishment housed in a 3-story brick building with tall windows and a doorman in livery. It was where Denver's elite gathered to smoke cigars, drink imported whiskey, and conduct the business that shaped the city's future. It was also, Marcus reflected bitterly, where men like Caldwell felt untouchable. They arrived at 5 minutes before noon. Cooper's plan was precise. The marshals would surround the building, blocking all exits. Marcus and Cooper would enter through the front door, locate Caldwell, and make the arrest before he could react. Speed and surprise were essential. Marcus checked his pocket watch as the carriage stopped a block away from the club. 11:58. The other arrests are happening now. Then let's not keep Mr. Caldwell waiting, Cooper said grimly. They walked to the club with purpose, their boots ringing on the cobblestones. The doorman, recognizing Marcus from previous visits during investigations, nodded respectfully and opened the door. They entered a world of dark wood paneling, leather furniture, and the smell of expensive tobacco. The dining room was to the left, and through its open doors, Marcus could see Denver's powerful men seated at white-clothed tables, enjoying their midday meals. And there, at a corner table with a view of the street, sat Harrison Caldwell. He was a handsome man in his early 60s, with silver hair swept back from a distinguished face. He wore an impeccably tailored suit and ate his lunch with refined manners, the picture of respectable success. Looking at him, no one would guess the rot beneath that polished surface. Caldwell looked up as Marcus and Cooper approached, and for just an instant, fear flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by a cold smile. "Detective Holloway," he said smoothly, "and Marshal Cooper, to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Cooper stepped forward and pulled out his badge, holding it high enough for everyone in the dining room to see. The conversations around them died as heads turned. "Harrison Caldwell," Cooper said, his voice carrying through the sudden silence, "I am placing you under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, bribery of public officials, and conspiracy to commit murder." Caldwell's face went white. "This is outrageous. I am the president of First National Bank." "You can't simply—" "We can, and we are," Marcus interrupted, pulling out handcuffs. "Stand up, Mr. Caldwell. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." For a moment, Marcus thought Caldwell might resist. The banker's hand moved toward his coat pocket, and Marcus's hand went immediately to his revolver. But Cooper was faster, his own weapon already drawn and pointed at Caldwell's chest. "I wouldn't," Cooper said quietly. "You're a thief and a murderer, Caldwell, but you're not stupid. It's over. Your associates are being arrested as we speak. Your network of corruption is finished." Caldwell's shoulders sagged, and the fight went out of him. He stood slowly, extending his wrists for the handcuffs. As Marcus secured them, Caldwell's eyes burned with hatred. "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed. "I built this city. I made Denver what it is." "No," Marcus said coldly. "You corrupted it. You stole from honest people, poisoned institutions that were meant to serve justice, and you murdered a good man named Thomas Monroe because he dared to document your crimes." At the mention of Thomas Monroe's name, Caldwell's face twisted. That meddling accountant should have minded his own business. "He made it his business to seek the truth," Marcus said, "and his daughter has finished what he started. Every transaction you falsified, every bribe you paid, every dollar you stole, it's all documented, decoded, and ready to be presented in court." Caldwell's face went from white to gray. "The journal. She has the journal." "She does," Cooper confirmed, "and she's somewhere you'll never reach her, protected by federal marshals and by men who actually understand the meaning of honor." As they led Caldwell out of the dining room, the other club members watched in stunned silence. Marcus saw shock on some faces, satisfaction on others, and he knew that this arrest would send ripples through Denver's power structure for years to come. Outside, a crowd had gathered, drawn by the sight of multiple marshals surrounding the prestigious club. When Caldwell emerged in handcuffs, gasps and murmurs ran through the spectators. News of the arrest would be all over Denver within the hour. They loaded Caldwell into a reinforced prison wagon that Cooper had waiting. As the wagon pulled away toward the federal jail, Cooper turned to Marcus with a satisfied smile. "It's done. The reports are coming in now. All the other arrests were successful. We've got judges, police officers, and 3 city councilmen in custody. The prosecutor says this is the biggest corruption case in territorial history." Marcus felt relief wash over him, but it was tempered by urgent need. "I have to get back to Catherine." Cooper nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Go. Take my personal carriage. I'll handle the processing here." Marcus didn't need to be told twice. He climbed into Cooper's carriage and ordered the driver to make all speed to the marshal's house outside the city. As Denver flashed past the windows, Marcus's thoughts were entirely focused on Catherine, on seeing her safe, on keeping the promise he'd made. When the carriage finally pulled up to Cooper's house, Marcus leaped down before it had fully stopped. The marshals on guard smiled and waved him through, and he took the porch steps 2 at a time. Inside, he heard voices from upstairs. He climbed quickly, his heart pounding, and found Catherine in the bedroom, standing at the window with Dr. Pemberton, who was evidently checking her injury. Catherine turned at the sound of his footsteps, and her face lit up with joy. "Marcus, is it done?" "It's done," Marcus confirmed, crossing to her. "Caldwell is in custody. So are all his associates. It's over, Catherine. You're safe." Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of relief and happiness. "My father's work is finished. Justice is served." Dr. Pemberton cleared his throat diplomatically. "Well, Miss Monroe's wound is healing nicely. She'll need to continue resting for another week or so, but there's no sign of infection. I'll leave you two to celebrate this victory." He gathered his bag and headed for the door, pausing to add with a knowing smile, "Though I do recommend avoiding too much excitement, Miss Monroe. Doctor's orders." When they were alone, Marcus took Catherine's hands in his, looking down at her with an expression that made her heart race. "I made you a promise," he said softly. "A promise about dinner and candlelight and proper courtship." "You did," Catherine agreed, her voice catching with emotion. "But before we get to that," Marcus continued, "I need to tell you something. These past 2 days with you have been the most extraordinary of my life. You've shown me what it means to be truly brave, to fight for what's right no matter the cost. You've shown me what partnership looks like, what it means to stand with someone rather than protect them from the world." "Marcus, let me finish," he said gently. "I know it's too soon to speak of forever. I know we should take time to court properly, to learn each other's favorite books and foods and all the small details that make a person who they are. But I also know, with absolute certainty, that I want all of that with you. I want the dinners and the walks and the conversations. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're in the world. I want to build a life with you, Catherine Monroe, if you'll have me." Catherine felt tears spill down her cheeks, but she was smiling through them. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it. The courtship and the partnership and the life together. Yes, Marcus." Marcus cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, tender and sweet and full of promise. Catherine's arms came around his neck, and for a long moment, they simply held each other, two people who had found something precious in the midst of danger and darkness. When they finally drew apart, both were smiling. Marcus wiped away her tears with his thumbs, his touch infinitely gentle. "So," he said, "shall we start with that dinner tonight? I know a restaurant with an excellent view of the mountains and the best roast duck in Colorado." Catherine laughed, the sound bright and happy. "Tonight sounds perfect. But Marcus, I have a confession to make." "Oh?" "I don't know your favorite color, or your favorite season, or whether you prefer coffee or tea in the morning." Marcus grinned. "Then we'd better start learning. Coffee, by the way, strong and black, and my favorite color just became the exact shade of green of your eyes." "Flatterer," Catherine accused, but she was smiling. "Truth-teller," Marcus corrected. "What about you? Tell me something I don't know." Catherine thought for a moment. "I love thunderstorms. The bigger and louder, the better. My father used to let me sit on the porch during summer storms, and we'd count the seconds between lightning and thunder, calculating how far away the strikes were. Mathematics even during storms," Marcus said fondly. "That's very you." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears and hopes. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Marcus reluctantly stood to leave so Catherine could rest and prepare for their dinner. "I'll return at 7 o'clock, he said, "in my best suit, with flowers, to escort you to dinner properly." "I'll be ready," Catherine promised. At the door, Marcus turned back. "Catherine, thank you." "For what?" "For stepping off that stagecoach, for being brave enough to seek justice, for giving me the chance to stand beside you." He smiled. "For changing my life." Catherine crossed to him and kissed him softly. "Thank you for catching me when I fell, in every possible way." That evening, Marcus arrived precisely at 7 o'clock, dressed in a dark suit with a white shirt and silk tie, carrying a bouquet of white roses and purple asters. Catherine wore a dress of deep emerald that brought out the color of her eyes, borrowed from Marshall Cooper's late wife's wardrobe. Her auburn hair was arranged in an elegant style, and despite the bandages still wrapped around her torso beneath the dress, she looked radiant. The restaurant Marcus had chosen was intimate and elegant, with tables set far apart for privacy and large windows overlooking the mountains. They were seated at the best table, and over courses of duck and roasted vegetables, fresh bread and wine, they continued the conversation they'd started that afternoon. Marcus told her about his childhood, about losing his parents and finding purpose in police work. Catherine shared memories of her father, stories that made them both laugh and brought tears to her eyes. They talked about books they loved, places they wanted to visit, dreams they'd held secret in their hearts. As dessert arrived, a delicate vanilla cake with fresh berries, Marcus reached across the table and took Catherine's hand. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "It's not what you might think, not yet. We'll take our time with that. But I wanted you to have this." He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver locket on a chain. Inside was a tiny photograph that made Catherine gasp. It was her father, younger than she remembered him, smiling at the camera. "How did you—" "Your Uncle Richard," Marcus explained. "I asked him before he left for Colorado Springs if he had any photographs of your father. He gave me this one. I had it sized to fit the locket. I thought you might like to keep him close to your heart." Catherine's tears flowed freely now. "Marcus, it's perfect. It's the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me." Marcus stood and came around the table, fastening the locket around her neck. His fingers lingered on her shoulders, and Catherine reached up to cover his hands with her own. "Your father was a remarkable man," Marcus said softly. "He raised a remarkable daughter. I wish I could have known him, could have asked his blessing for courting you properly." "He would have loved you," Catherine said with certainty. "He always said that a man's character was revealed in how he treated those weaker than himself, and in whether he stood up for what was right, even when it was difficult. You've shown both of those qualities, Marcus. My father would have been proud to know you, and proud that his daughter found such a man." Marcus returned to his seat, and they finished their dessert in comfortable silence, hands linked across the table. Around them, other diners came and went, but Marcus and Catherine existed in their own world, a bubble of happiness and new love. As they left the restaurant, stepping out into the cool October evening, Marcus offered Catherine his arm. They walked slowly through Denver's gas-lit streets, in no hurry to end the evening. "What happens now?" Catherine asked as they strolled. "With Caldwell's trial, I mean." "The federal prosecutor says it will take a few months to prepare the case, but with your father's journal as evidence, conviction is certain. Caldwell will spend the rest of his life in prison. So will most of his associates." Marcus paused. "Your Uncle Richard has agreed to testify as well. He's finding his courage finally." "Good," Catherine said firmly. "And what about you? Your career?" Marcus smiled. "Actually, Marshal Cooper has offered me a position as a federal detective. He says he needs men he can trust, men who put justice above politics. I'm considering it." "You should accept," Catherine said immediately. "You'd be wonderful in that role." "There's just one complication," Marcus said, stopping beneath a street lamp and turning to face her. "The position would mean staying in Denver permanently, and I wouldn't want to accept if you're planning to return to San Francisco." Catherine's heart skipped. "Are you asking me to stay in Denver, Marcus?" "I'm asking what your plans are," Marcus said carefully. "I don't want to assume or presume, but if you were staying, if Denver could become your home, then that would factor significantly into my decision." Catherine looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, then back at Marcus's handsome, earnest face. "I came to Denver seeking answers about my father's legacy. I found that, and justice for his death. But I also found something I wasn't looking for and didn't expect." She stepped closer to him. "I found you, Marcus. I found a partner and a friend, and someone I could love for the rest of my life. San Francisco was never truly home. It was just a place I lived after my father died. But Denver, with you, could be home." Marcus's smile was brilliant. "Then stay. Build a life here with me. We'll court properly, take our time, do everything right. And when we're both ready, when enough time has passed that everyone agrees it's proper and respectable, I'll ask you a different question, one that comes with a different kind of ring." "I'll be waiting for that question," Catherine said, rising on her toes to kiss him. "And I already know my answer." They stood there on the Denver street, wrapped in each other's arms, as the city moved around them. Above, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, and the mountains stood eternal against the sky. Two people who had been alone had found each other in the midst of danger and mystery, and from that unlikely beginning they were building something beautiful and lasting. 3 months later, on a crisp January morning, Catherine sat in the federal courthouse as Harrison Caldwell was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Beside her sat Marcus, holding her hand, and on her other side sat her Uncle Richard, who had found his courage and testified powerfully against his former associate. When the judge's gavel fell, sealing Caldwell's fate, Catherine felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Her father's work was truly finished. Justice had been served. That evening, Marcus took her to the same restaurant where they'd had their first proper dinner. But this time, when dessert arrived, he knelt beside her chair, pulled out a small velvet box, and asked the question Catherine had been waiting for. "Catherine Monroe, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Through happy tears, Catherine said yes, and as Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, the other diners applauded. It was a moment of pure joy, the beginning of a new chapter in their story. They were married that spring, in a small ceremony attended by Marshal Cooper, Dr. Pemberton, Uncle Richard, and a handful of Marcus's trusted colleagues. Catherine wore white silk and carried white roses, and when Marcus saw her walking toward him, his eyes filled with tears of happiness. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other for all their days, Catherine touched the silver locket at her throat and knew her father was with her in spirit, proud and happy that his daughter had found such love. The reception was held in Marshal Cooper's garden, where spring flowers bloomed in profusion, and the mountains provided a stunning backdrop. As the sun set and the first stars appeared, Marcus led Catherine in their first dance as husband and wife, holding her close and whispering promises of all the adventures they would share. "I love you, Mrs. Holloway," he murmured against her hair. "And I love you, Mr. Holloway," Catherine replied, her heart full to bursting with happiness. They had stepped into each other's lives in the midst of mystery and danger, two strangers brought together by fate and circumstance. But they had chosen each other deliberately, built their love on foundation of trust and partnership and mutual respect. And as they danced under the Colorado stars, beginning their life together, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side, partners in every sense of the word. The mystery that had brought them together was solved, the villains were punished, and justice had prevailed. But the greatest mystery of all, how two hearts could find each other in a vast world and recognize their perfect match. That mystery they would spend a lifetime exploring together, grateful every day for the moment when Catherine stepped off that stagecoach bleeding and Marcus was there to catch her, beginning a love story that would last forever.